Welcome to Seek Reality with Roberta Grimes. Joyous conversations about what the afterlife evidence and modern science combine to tell us is true about our one reality. You have nothing to fear. You are eternal and you are perfectly loved. Knowing the truth changes everything. Now, here's Roberta.
Welcome to Seek Reality. I'm Roberta Grimes, and I'm really happy you're here today. This is going to be fun. You know, one of the things that being part of our podcast family makes especially fun is when we can talk about special ways in which we can learn to communicate with people who have gone on ahead of us just for a little while to the next plane of life. And one of the most wonderful ways that's ever been developed, really, for therapists to help people to hear from our transitioned loved ones is called Induced After-Death Communication, or IADC therapy. This method was first developed decades ago by Dr. Alan Botkin and a few others, including our wonderful friend, Dr. R. Craig Hogan. And it can be literally miraculous. In some cases, it can produce such perfect meetings with people who have gone on ahead that grief that was almost unbearable can be almost entirely healed in one sitting. This is almost incredible. Our guest today, all the way from Australia, is Dr. Tom Nehmy. He is a clinical psychologist with over 20 years experience, and he has a literal passion for healing grief with IADC. And I just can't wait to hear his story. His book is wonderful, so I'm just eager to talk with him. He has had his own spontaneous after-death communications, and he's now a visiting research fellow at the University of Adelaide in Australia, where he has conducted a controlled evaluation of IADC therapy. But believe me, this stuff works. It really works. He also runs a virtual private practice with a mission to make this totally amazing and extraordinary form of therapy available to anyone, anywhere in the world, from the comfort of their own home, wherever it is. And I know, from personal experience, I know this is a very tiny world. Tom is the author of a great new book called Inspired Life, Beautiful Death, Healing Grief, Overcoming Fear of Death, and Living a Spiritual Life, in which he details his personal spiritual awakening and journey from being just a therapist who felt completely helpless in the face of grief to being able now to profoundly help people using IADC. He has previously been awarded the 2015 Flinders University Vice Chancellor's Prize for doctoral, I'm very excited about this. I can't wait to get going. Doctoral thesis excellence. And he has delivered workshops and keynote addresses to more than 50,000 people worldwide. He's now considered a leading IADC expert. And this is tricky. This is beautiful, but it's not always easy to do. So the fact that he's an expert is really exciting. We're so fortunate to have him with us today. I can't wait to get going. Welcome, Tom, to Seek Reality. Let's just do this.
Roberta, thank you for that lovely introduction, and it's so wonderful to be with you. There's a lot to talk about when it comes to IADC therapy and grief therapy and connecting with people who have gone on. So this is a passion. You're absolutely right. I'd love to tell you a bit about the background, how I came across this, because while I'm very excited to be participating in research, writing books, giving talks about this, it wasn't always that way. As a clinical psychologist, you might imagine my interest was always in healing people and helping them emotionally, which most of the time I felt pretty confident in doing, and I found that work immensely rewarding. But when it came to people who were in grief, I really struggled. And I recall some particular clients where they were very distressed. I desperately wanted to help them. But unlike treating somebody who's experiencing anxiety or depression, grief's different because you can't fix what happened. You can't change what has occurred. And I was certainly willing to sit with my clients. I was happy to help them manage their distress, to work on their well-being, but I just felt pretty helpless to do anything substantive. And when I came across IADC, that just changed everything for me because we can really help people now.
Yeah, this is an amazing procedure. I know because when I first learned about it, and this was what must more than a decade ago, I just was overwhelmed. I almost didn't believe it was possible. And then when I saw it done, I talked to people who had been through it, who had been inconsolable, and I mean, Alan Bodkin himself was really good at it. And when I saw one experience, a woman who talked about walking on the beach with her daughter who was deceased, and that one experience, she said, I'm telling you, she's okay. Now I'm okay. Those were the words she used, and I was overwhelmed. I said, wow, this is unbelievable. I mean, I knew that the daughter was fine already because this is my field. I had already researched everybody's okay when they're after they've died. But I saw the before and after, and I got to tell you, Tom, I could not get over that. So how did you discover it? Tell me your story.
Well, I'd always had an interest in spirituality and metaphysics just since I was a child. I don't know, I was born that way. I had this sense that there was something more than the physical world around us. But my career to that point had been pretty straight-laced, standard clinical psychology work. I came across IADC therapy when I was walking my dog one day, listening to Alan Botkin being interviewed. So I had my headphones in, I'm walking the dog thinking, oh, this sounds interesting. He's a clinical psychologist like me. Yeah. But then he talked about how he had adapted a now very mainstream trauma therapy called eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. Yes. EMDR, which is now pretty mainstream. People thought it was a bit unusual when it first came out because it involves what's called bilateral stimulation. We stimulate alternate hemispheres of the brain, either through eye movement, left to right, sometimes tapping, and this puts the brain into a healing mode. Well, we know that helps people with post-traumatic stress disorder, but what Alan Botkin was talking about was how he had tweaked and adapted this standard EMDR protocol to help people who were dealing with what he called loss traumas, where somebody had died. And he formed the view that if you focus on sadness rather than other emotions relating to this traumatic event, that it was going to be much more effective. And not only was it very effective at reducing people's sadness, they felt better very quickly. But one of his patients in a VA hospital in Chicago spontaneously reported that he saw under closed eyelids the object of his grief, a young girl who had died in Vietnam, and she spoke to him. She said, I love you. Thank you for taking care of me. He said, I love you. And it resolved this multi-decade-long grief and trauma.
Yes, I remember that story. That's huge.
Amazing. And of course, Alan Botkin was a bit concerned. He was a bit perturbed by this. He didn't know what to make of it initially. Yeah. And so it was a surprise again when the same thing occurred with another patient and then another. And he eventually talks about having to go back to his clinical notes to figure out what is it that I'm doing differently in these cases because something incredible is happening. And so he identified a few things that became this IADC therapy protocol. And he was then able to have similar results in an inpatient setting in the hospital with 97% of his grieving patients.
Wow.
Just amazing.
This is an extraordinary procedure. This is just, it's so all right. So you were blown away. And what did you do next?
Well, I thought this sounds like I must pursue this. I mean, I'm a clinical psychologist like Alan Botkin. I'm interested in spirituality. I'm interested in EMDR, but this is just extraordinary. So I eventually became trained as an IDC therapist, and I committed myself to conducting a research study at the University of Adelaide because one of the things, you know, you have these thoughts. How's it going to be received professionally? How am I going to promote this? How's it going to be received? And I knew I needed to do it, but I thought Alan Botkin had always said, we need more university research. We need to build up the scientific evidence base and the credibility of this therapy in the eyes of mainstream psychology. So that was when I conducted a major research study at the University of Adelaide. I wanted to verify this for myself. Is it as amazing as it seems and as people say? Of course, I read Dr. Alan Botkin's book as well, which is fantastic, which he wrote with R. Craig Hogan. The book's called Induced After Death Communication. I really recommend it. And before I started this research study, though, Roberta, I have to tell you, I didn't need to be convinced of the phenomenon of after-death communications. Induced after-death communication therapy was another step, but I had had my own after-death communications. So this really set the scene for me to be very open to this kind of phenomenon. I'll tell you the story about my first one because it really opened me up to this. I was very, very close to my dear grandmother, who I called Nana. And I spent a lot of time with my Nana when I was young. If I was bothered by something at home, I'd go into the spare room, I'd pick up the phone and say, Nana, come and get me. And I'd pack a bag and I'd go and stay at her house. And I would do this every week or multiple times a week.
Yeah.
We were so close. It didn't matter if I was a rat bag, Roberta. She always told my mum, oh, he was wonderful, right? It was that kind of unconditional love. So
that's the best kind of grandma. It really is.
It really is. And so, you know, as my Nana got older, I was becoming increasingly aware of this emotional vulnerability I had. I thought, my gosh, one day she'll no longer be with us. And this really pulled at my heartstrings because she was the closest person in the world to me, really. Well, eventually, when I was in my, mid-20s, it would have been, she, at the age of 84, developed pneumonia. She had some dementia and she passed, which I was upset because I was so close to her and I stayed close to her throughout her entire life. Even when I was a teenager running around and doing whatever, I still would always go and visit Nana. But I always thought to myself, if there is something, Nana's going to come and visit me. You know, this is, of course, you know, if there is something, this is the person who's going to give me a sign or send me a message or something. Now, months went by and there was nothing. I didn't have any particular visions or awakenings or dreams or anything. And I was feeling a little bit concerned, a bit despondent, but of course, as a young person, a new young professional, my life was just busy with so many things. I just let it sit into the back of my mind until one day, I think it was about 12 to 18 months after she passed, I was coming out of sleep one morning. It was definitely not a dream. And I saw her. I had my eyes closed, but I saw her very clearly, like high definition TV, and she was smiling. She had her auburn curls. She had this bright red lipstick on, her bright blue eyes, and she was smiling at me. She looked about 25 years younger than when she passed.
Yeah. That's what happens. They become very young and beautiful again. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I mentally said to her, Nan, you look so good. You know, it's so good to see you. And she didn't say anything. She was just smiling, and I felt this wave of love wash over me. So, and when I opened my eyes eventually, the sun was just coming through the window. It was morning, and I realized my pillow was soaked with tears. This was such an emotional thing to reconnect with her. And I just thought, finally, it's happened. It is real. And I knew then that she was still with me.
Just fine. She's just fine. Yes. And she loves you. Oh, what a wonderful experience. I'm so happy that happened for you.
And she came back again. This was the thing, Roberta. So it wasn't the last time I saw her, or felt her, I should say. At two or three other moments in my life when particular things were going on, I distinctly felt her presence when I was wide awake. Yeah. And she was always there to comfort me or reassure me or tell me that things were going to work out okay. And so when I then came across IDC therapy, I didn't need to be convinced that ADCs are a thing.
Yes. The afterlife is there. The communication is possible. But wow, this is a powerful, powerful tool. I mean, seeing people who have had it happen, knowing how terrible and desperate their grief was, and seeing how immediately it could be cured just by having that person there with them again. And this is such a powerful tool. I think it's amazing. So anyway, when Sandra Champlain made our connection, when she told me, "Hey, you've got to have this guy on Seek Reality," I said, "Yeah, give me the connection, because wow, I want to talk to somebody else who's really doing this and doing it successfully."
And I have to say, Roberta, it's the most powerful and impactful therapy I've ever come across. Now, that's really saying something. I've been a psychologist for 20 years, but in terms of the impact that it has, how rapidly it can change somebody's emotional state,
yes.
There's nothing else like it. We can have people intensely distressed, 10 out of 10 if you ask them, and by the end of one session or two sessions, they're at a 1 or a 0, or they've got tears and they're saying these are happy tears.
Yes.
I don't know of any other therapy that can do that.
I feel the same way, because I've seen that several times with people that have gone through this with other therapists. It's a universal phenomenon that it works this well. So more and more therapists ought to start using this system. It works so well. And the fact that you can do it, you can sort of Zoom with people all over the world and do it from where you are in Australia is fabulous. I'm so happy you can do that. That's great.
Yeah. I was initially, when I heard it can be done over Zoom, I thought, really, I wonder how that all works. But now I'm several years into doing a lot of this work. And we even analysed that very question in our Adelaide University research. Is there a difference in outcome between in-person or Zoom sessions? And the fundamental answer was there were no substantive differences between the outcomes. So you could be on the other side of the earth and you can expect to have just the same therapeutic impact as someone who's in the room, which is just extraordinary to me. And it opens it up. It means we can get this to more people.
Which is wonderful. Are you training other people as well?
The training goes through the IADC board. So currently there are 2 co-directors, my mentor, Cessa Valdez, and Dr. Noel Saint-Germain-Serre, and they run the global organisation. So if people are interested in training or even a directory of practitioners, they can go to a website, induced-adc.com. And this is where there's information around training. You can search for your part of the world if you want to see if there's anyone local to you. I think this is the big challenge now, Roberta, is we really have, I think, an ethical obligation to get this out to more people.
I agree.
Because, if we have a treatment, if you were dealing with something else, let's say you were treating some particular disease and you had drug A and drug B, and you knew that drug B was likely to be multiple times more effective for most people than the other drug, you'd have an ethical obligation to go with the one that's most likely to work. Well, psychotherapy is no different, so we need to get this out there, put it on the scientific agenda for mainstream psychologists. And actually, on that point, I have to tell you, Roberta, I was speaking at a psychology conference in Queensland just 3 months ago here in Australia. It was one of the biggest Australian clinical psychology conferences. So my audience was all psychologists, and I was talking about my research. But before I started talking, I had all of these professionals raise their hand, and they were a bit suspicious of what I was getting them into. But I said, please raise your hand. And then I said, keep your hand in the air if you've ever perceived the presence of a deceased person. Well, 2/3 of the audience kept their hand up. So even though I at some stage maybe had these fears about, well, how is this going to be received? Is it really going to be thought of as odd or different? But people can relate to this because after-death communications are very common.
Very common. Yes, nowadays. I've watched this happen because I've been doing this teaching work for the past, 20 plus years. And at the start of it, people were skeptical, very skeptical. But nowadays, it's very common for people to have had experiences with people we used to think were dead. Most people now understand that death is a transition to a different phase. But grief is a problem. Grief is a disease. And there are people who never get over it. As you know, I'm not telling you anything you don't know. So this cures it. And if you can cure it, I don't think there's anything else that really does, actually. I've never seen it. Intractable grief, especially for a child. For people who die out of order, that this is something that fixes that problem. And I think you're right. I think that we have to get the word out there and have more people who are practitioners of this method, because it works so well. We have to figure out how to get more people who are able to do it and can do it successfully.
Yes, absolutely. I've personally been just so humbled by seeing this very natural psycho-spiritual process take place. On one hand, it seems quite mechanical and simple. You get people to move their eyes back and forth while they're feeling their sadness. And this therapy is very good at reducing sadness. So I must say that even if someone doesn't feel the presence of their loved one, this is still a very, very helpful therapy just to make people feel better. They'll say, I feel lighter, I feel less teary, I feel better able to move forward. So for well over 90% of people, they report a significant reduction in their sadness. That's an incredible run rate in and of itself. And when we go to look at the number of people having these after-death communications, which naturally tend to occur when the sadness has been reduced and people say, I feel very peaceful, very calm, that's when it puts people in what we call a receptive state. They're predisposed to feeling those connections.
Yes.
And that's happening in 70 to 75% of cases, sometimes even more. And I always say to people, that's a cherry on top. If we go into it grasping for it, the cruel reality is sometimes we can overdo that by trying to control it. And it's very understandable that sometimes people feel that way. But I always say to people, we want you to stay as relaxed as you possibly can. We want to dissolve and process this stuck sadness. I have this metaphor, this visual metaphor of an ice block melting and then going to steam. And it's very much like a dissolving process. And then we're going to see what happens. And that'll be a cherry on top. So when people are very relaxed and even not so much expecting it, they're in the best position to potentially have it.
There have been some people, too, who have developed a relationship with that deceased loved one that continued, that they were able to go to a specific place and meet with that loved one. I don't know how long that relationship continued, but they did develop that kind of relationship with that loved one, which really surprised me. I didn't understand that was possible, too. But
yes,
I think this is something that we really more people should know about. Most people don't have any idea about that this is going on now.
Yeah, and that's part of my personal mission now, you mentioned earlier, is to make it available to conduct scientific research that will help raise the profile of this therapy, and to write books and give talks and really help spread the word. I feel compelled to do that. So this has become definitely a personal and professional mission for me.
Which is, it's good to have something you can really be a crusader for in your life.
I feel like that.
You find that, so you have that.
Yes, I do. And I almost feel, I want to evangelize the benefits of this and do it in a scientific way, in a balanced way. But we don't need to exaggerate what occurs because the therapy itself is so effective.
No, you don't need to exaggerate it. Anytime people can go from it's an 11 to it's like a 0 anytime people can do that kind of shift in an hour, which sometimes can happen, I mean, you can't do better than that. That's incredible.
Yeah. Roberta, would you like me to share with you a case example from my book?
Oh, please. Oh, yes. That would be very, very great. Yeah. Go ahead.
So I had a participant who I've given the pseudonym Natalie. My book has 9 case studies in it of this therapy. And she was incredibly close in her marriage to her dear husband. They'd been together since they were teenagers. And he passed very suddenly and unexpectedly in a motor accident. It was just a regular kind of day. They were having a great day together, and he went out and didn't come back. And this was just, it shattered the world of my client. And Natalie was struggling in grief, and she actually said to me, "I feel like I'm drowning in it." This was how she described her grief. And it was, when I saw her, it was, I think, maybe from memory, about 3 years on. And she just said,
she was still at that level of grief. Oh my.
Yeah, she was stuck. That's the best description. She was really stuck in it. I started doing the eye movement with her over Zoom, and I had her follow a blue dot across the screen that I was controlling from my end. And clients have to be very courageous in this therapy, because we need them to step into the intensity of their emotion. If they can't access the emotion, we can't process it. So I always say to people, it's not for everyone, and we're going to be asking you to go into the strongest part of the most deep sadness that you have about this loss. So people have to be prepared for that. Well, she was prepared for that. Yeah. And she said, I'll do anything. I've got to try something. And so it's often very intense. We do these sets of eye movement. People are feeling their sadness. They're often quite distressed. And we just need to keep going. We always say to our clients, you just got to keep your foot on the gas, and we're going to get to the other side of this dark tunnel that you feel you're in. Well, she noticed that her sadness was reducing, and you actually observe it in real time. Successive sets of bilateral stimulation reduce the intensity of this sadness. And she said, this is strange at one point. I'm really not feeling as sad right now. I don't know what's happened. I said, that's great. Let's not judge it. Just keep going. Yeah. And when people start feeling better, we don't stop. We see if the good feelings that emerge get stronger. And so one of the things that Natalie experienced, and there was actually an unusual thing about her case, and this is not common, but she actually noticed that the photograph of her husband sitting on her desk was changing. So she was attending to me, and she said, this is distracting me, but I'm seeing different images appear in the photo frame. Now, this is not a normal or usual part of the procedure, but it was part of it. And she said, I can see images of him when he was a child in primary school. These are not photographs I've seen before, but I'm seeing them in the photo frame. And when she described that, I knew we were getting close to something. So I said, well, let's observe that, but let's keep going, because I felt that we were on the verge of her having a direct experience. It's not always what people expect, Roberta. Sometimes they expect it's going to be like someone walks into the room and sits in the chair. It's not usually like that. But under closed eyelids, she said, I keep seeing this intensely bright orange color. It's like I'm seeing lava. And she was really consumed by this under closed eyelids. And I said to her, tell me what the feeling is that comes with this lava that you're seeing, this orange energy. And she said it's intense love and happiness. So emotion is always the guiding sign in this therapy. And she was absolutely overwhelmed with this intense love and happiness that was coming from her husband, that she was then in tears again. So this was the tears at the end of the therapy, the happy tears, as opposed to the distressed tears at the beginning. And it was just a fabulous outcome for her.
And the pain was gone?
Because I always follow up my clients. I want to know, has this stuck for you, right? And it was fascinating. Clients normally report they feel exhausted. They feel absolutely wiped out after these sessions, which is understandable. She said she felt really good for the rest of that day and the next day. She had one day where she felt terrible. And then from the following day, she felt good. So, clients can often be almost in disbelief. They'll say, I can think of my loved one, but I'm feeling love and gratitude. I'm not feeling this. I'm not crying. They'll often say, I was crying every day and now I'm not crying. They'll say things like, I feel more at peace. And I'm back to my old self. And Natalie reported to me, she said, people are now saying to me, what's happened? You seem like your old self again.
Oh, beautiful, beautiful, beautiful.
So,
and he was right there helping her through that.
Yeah.
All that love from him.
It's just so you can get a sense then of how gratifying this work is. And for a therapist who was once helpless in the face of grief, this is what I want to spend my time doing.
Yeah, because it is very difficult. I mean, people come to me and they're in terrible grief, and all I can do is say he or she is fine, and give them, books and materials. You can really do something about it, which I think is so wonderful. You can really do something about it.
We can really help people. And part of this research that we've conducted, along with my colleague, a psychologist in Queensland called John Daniels, we've got this major research project under a review with a scientific journal as we speak. We found that the effect size, the actual measure of impact of the therapy, for example, how much it's reduced someone's sadness, is double that of standard psychotherapies that are considered really effective.
Yeah.
So in 2 sessions, we're having often twice the impact of regular therapies that might be taking 12 sessions and not being as strong. So it's quite remarkable.
Oh, it is so remarkable. I mean, what a difference.
It is.
And so you can't help everyone, I would think. I mean, what is the kind of mind that you can't help? I mean, are there some people that you just can't help? Are they resistant to being helped?
Occasionally.
Or what?
So we find people who do well in this therapy need to be open. So we do actually a very thorough screening call with everybody, because we know that for some people the therapy might not be quite for them. So we want them to be aware that it requires them to tolerate very strong emotions.
You have to be willing to go into the pain. You're going to have to face the pain and go through it.
Absolutely.
Some people say, "Oh, I could never do that," and you say, "Oh, maybe this isn't for you."
Right. Absolutely. Okay. If they have strong beliefs that their grief cannot or will not change, that can be a block. And we say to people, you don't have to believe that this will work, but you have to believe that it might work. You have to be open to the possibility.
Be open to it. Okay. That's very important. Yeah.
Yeah. If people are saying to themselves, oh, but it's always going to be this way, it's always going to be this way, it's like putting a handbrake on. It's like a handbrake when you're trying to drive. So we also know that it's very common for people to feel ambivalent about letting go of their sadness, because some people see they don't want the pain on one hand, but on the other hand, they see the pain as their connection to the loved one.
Yeah,
I see that quite a lot.
But then he'll be gone. I won't have him anymore or it's disrespectful to my loved one. Something like that.
That's what they worry about. Yeah. What would it mean if I was happy again? Or what would it mean? Would it be dishonoring my loved one if I was laughing and enjoying my life after this terrible thing has happened?
But you say to people then, but he loves you. He wouldn't want you to be so sad. Mm. Does that help?
Yeah.
Do you say that?
Yeah, I think so. I can ask the question of them, and people will often resolve that. We reassure them that if you reduce your sadness, you're not reducing your connection. In fact, you may be quite likely strengthening your connection to your loved one. but we're changing the nature of that connection. Instead of being defined by this intense pain and sadness, we want that connection to be defined by peace and love and acceptance and gratitude. Yeah, that's what we're changing it to.
Of course, yeah.
So it's been quite an experience these past few years, learning about the therapy, doing this research at University of Adelaide, writing my book. It really caused me to go down the rabbit hole of all things near death. And I'm an avid consumer of a lot of research and case studies. When I wrote my book, Inspired Life, Beautiful Death, I wanted to give people an insight into, I guess, some of the big questions that we have. Mm-hmm. So people sometimes think, well, and I know you've wrote about this extensively, is, what happens when someone dies? What happens to my loved one? Where are they? And this is the big fear, isn't it? Is that my loved one is gone, they cease to exist, I'm separated from them. Yep. That's where the pain comes from. Yeah. But as you and I know, that's not the case at all. In fact, one of the chapters of my book is called Dying is Beautiful. Now, that might seem like such a strange thing to people, but when we look at the testimony of near-death experiences and we learn about the process of death and the transition to the other side, I wrote a book called Fun of Dying, so, Exactly. Right. Exactly. You know all about this, Roberta. And people generally they're not distressed. They're well and whole. They're, often don't regret that they've transitioned. Oh. They might, so
this is great. More of this, right?
We've got to change the way we think about that, right? And that's comforting too.
Yeah, very, yeah. But what gets me about it is that grief is the one thing I really can't fix, and this is the one thing you really can fix. You can fix it. And that's what's beautiful about IADC.
Yeah, some people do say, I feel better. Now, of course, with any therapy, there are some people who will respond more strongly than others. But it is the case that some people will say quite literally, this has been life-changing for me.
Oh, yeah. The fellow in Dr. Botkin's book, who had been literally one of the great casualties of Vietnam, he was walking wounded for his whole life. And then he had that one experience, and that child came through. I remember that story to this day. That child came through and literally healed him in one session. I remember that story. That was big.
It's quite extraordinary. And for IADC therapists, we see these stories unfolding before our eyes every day. Yeah. It's quite remarkable. People will sometimes question the veracity of their own perceptions. They'll say, that's so strange, or it's, I'll give you an example. I had a lady who in my book I call Sheena, and Sheena had moved to Australia from Scotland. She had this fabulous Scottish accent. And when she would talk about her son who had passed, she was really kind of stuck in this immense grief from his passing from a drug overdose. And it was 10 years before, I think, that he had passed, but she was still really struggling with it. We were over Zoom. We were doing our therapy remotely. She was in another state to me. And Sheena was working through these, what we call pieces of sadness relating to her son's death. So a piece of sadness could be something very specific, like the moment I got the phone call, if that's a distressing memory, or it could be something broad, like I miss him. That's a piece of sadness. And we work through sequentially these pieces of sadness from the worst piece through to the least strong piece until the person is feeling not sad and they start feeling these good feelings come in. Well, she reported to me some very interesting things. At one point over our Zoom call, she opened her eyes and she said, the atmosphere feels different in my room. There's something going on. The energy's changed. And I was just curious. I said, well, just stay relaxed. Let's see what happens to it. But what do you think that relates to? And she said, I think it's my son. After another set, she felt someone touch her cheek, touch her hand. And then she had a visual ADC where she had her eyes closed, and her big question was, is my son okay? Her worry was that he was alone, disconnected, distressed. And she said, is he okay? Is he with people? And so I said, well, let's keep that question in mind and let's do another set and see what happens. Well, under closed eyelids, she had her eyes closed for quite a long time. And I just noticed a sort of tear trickle out of her eye. And afterwards, she opened her eyes. She said, you know, almost, I'm not sure if I'm going crazy, she said, but I saw my son and he was sitting on a grassy bank and he was motioning with his arm, look at who's here. And she said, I then saw this array of people who had deceased. I saw Aunt Jenny. I saw my ex-husband's father. I saw the dog. I saw, you know, his friend who'd passed, and they were all there.
They were all there.
The perfect answer to her question, is he alone or not? And the reason we knew this was really valid is it was not what she was expecting. And some of the people she saw were not people she would have chosen to see if she was inventing this. So her horrible ex-husband's father, why would he pop up in an after-death communication, right? But he was there.
Yeah, isn't that wonderful? Oh, my goodness. Oh, this is so beautiful. Oh, that's exactly the kind of thing we want to have happen. Oh, isn't that wonderful? What a gift this is for you to be able to do this work for people. Doesn't it make you happy all the time that you're able to wake up, open your eyes and say, I had another day to do this for people? What a gift.
I know. I feel incredibly privileged. And I've even said to Dr. Botkin, I'm immensely grateful for his courage and his work in bringing this out to the light of day, formalizing this protocol, you know, yes. Really starting this.
What a wonderful man he is to be able to have done all this and then shared it with the world. Yeah.
And the courage it would take, you know, he was really pushing boundaries and doing some quite daring things. And went to great lengths to be able to create something that can really help so many people. So we're all indebted to Alan Botkin, I have to say.
Yeah, so much indebted to him. All of us are, yes. Oh, I'm so sorry. We have come to the end of our time. What do you want people to take away from our conversation?
I just want people to know that death is not the end. Dying is not this terrible thing that we assume that it is.
Not at all.
Our loved ones are not lost to us at all, and grief can be healed. So this is a really
that is a big takeaway. If you're feeling sad, there is a cure for that too.
It's a really hopeful message, isn't it?
Yes, thank you. And I'm going to try to get the message to as many people as I can, because that's one thing I can't fix, but you certainly can. Thank you so much, dear. And you just stay right put, because I want to tell people who our next guest is, and I'll be right back. Oh, this has been so much fun. I could talk with him all day. Once again, my dears, we have come to the end of our time together. This has been Seek Reality with Roberta Grimes. I'm so happy you could hear this today. Please never forget, you are a powerful, eternal being. And when you get that, when it really sinks in, it changes everything in your life for the better. Next week, our guest will be Jacob Cooper, who will be with us for the 5th time. Jacob had his first near-death experience when he was 3 years old. I can't imagine that, but he did. And such experiences are often life-transforming. He wrote his first book a bit of a time after that, but it started with talking about that first experience. It was called Life After Breath, and he has spent his whole life really growing spiritually. His second book was called The Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder, and he still is growing spiritually. I love talking to him because he's always got something new to talk to us about. And so please join us next week so that we can sort of learn more from Jacob. I always find it would be a lot of fun. This week, we've been having a wonderful time talking with Tom Nehmy, who has been with us for the first Really, for the first time, I kind of feel energized again talking about IADCs because there are really so few people who know what they are. And we had to go all the way to wonderful Australia to find someone who's really, really doing them. But he can do them anywhere in the world. And so if you would like to know more about IADC, just learn more about this wonderful, wonderful man. His new book, which I really highly recommend, is called Inspired Life, Beautiful Death. It explains how this amazing therapy can help anybody, even if your grief is 11. He can probably help you in just one session, and it can be done anywhere in the world. So his at the foot of whatever you're hearing, when you're hearing or when you're seeing this podcast, you can find his email address. Sandra Champlain was so excited when she first told me about him. She said, "You've got to hear this man. He's wonderful." And as you can see, she was so right. My dear ones, the plain and simple fact is that our lives are eternal. We live forever in the arms of God, and that's true of all our loved ones. So don't let yourself simmer in grief forever. The veil between worlds is thinning more and more. IADC is one therapy, though, one way that we can often pierce that veil altogether and go on and live our lives knowing that those we love are all just fine. There's not much time to talk about what I've written and our wonderful website, seekreality.com. So I just want to end this by saying, please enjoy and make the most of this coming week in our One Reality, but please always know that you in particular are a powerful, eternal being, and you, most of all, in this entire universe, you are infinitely, eternally, and forever perfectly loved.
You've been listening to Seek Reality with Roberta Grimes. Roberta blogs and answers questions at robertagrimes.com. Join us every week as we explore what the afterlife evidence and modern science combine to tell us is true about the one reality we all share. Knowing the truth changes everything.